the senior warden of my lodge. Little does he know what's in store as we get ready to talk about America 250 and the Grand Lodge of New York, the big plans that we have. Let's welcome him into the podcast. Brother Chris Carosa, welcome to the Craftsmen Online podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
I love the being so humble. I'm just the senior warden of Union Star Lodge 320. Just the senior warden. Spoken like a true senior warden. How long have you been involved in masonry in upstate New York?
I would say maybe 5 or 6 years. I don't even remember.
Okay. It's
Definitely
been a
before
blur.
COVID, but I don't know how much earlier.
Nice, nice. Well, best of luck. This is the year you get to watch the East. We've done a bunch of podcasts about that leadership cycle. You're joining us under the America 250 banner, which, again, you're a big part of this. There's a huge committee across the Grand Lodge of New York. It's a big state. We've got a lot of history. And there's a lot of questions, I think, from just folks that might be tuning in, hearing this for the first time. What is America 250? And what's the big deal about this anniversary?
So if you're old enough, you probably remember the bicentennial and all the fun stuff that happened when you were a kid, from the little pie eating contest, soap carving contest, spelling bees, all that sort of nostalgic stuff. And it was great. Everybody loved saying the word bicentennial. Trains, locomotives, painted their locomotives in red, white, and blue colors. Cadillac came out with a bicentennial convertible Eldorado, which was white but red and blue trim. So it was a big thing. 50 years later, 250th anniversary. Can you say the word semi-quincentennial? It doesn't roll off the tongue as easily. And I think that's kind of like it makes it difficult for people to kind of embrace what this celebration is all about. But really, when you get to the bottom line, it's just the bicentennial plus 50 years. Only we get to decide how we're going to celebrate. We're going to participate the same way we did 50 years ago. But hey, if we like those parades, if we like those games, those contests involving kids, we get to do that. And we
Nice.
get to
Yeah.
do it for New York State in a way that kind of reflects on how the province, later state of New York, played the role it played within the Revolutionary War.
Oh, so many stories to get to. I love that you immediately took me back. I remember, I am old enough to remember the bicentennial. I remember the special quarters that came out that year and
Right?
how awesome they were. And yes, like most people, when I saw the actual of what 250 is in letters, I'm like, I couldn't even pronounce that supercalifragilisticexpialidocious word. So thank you for kind of simplifying this. And there is a lot to get excited about, not just for the Grand Lodge of New York, but as you said, the entire state of New York, our empire state. Outside of being a Freemason, you're also a historian. So give me a little significance as to the history of 250. What makes this so special for us?
Well, I'll actually take a step back because I just got done celebrating the 250th anniversary of Lafayette's travels through Western New York. I wrote a book on that, specifically with the Western New York region. And what I found as I was doing my book tour, as I was involved in the bicentennial celebrations for that event, people didn't even remember who Lafayette was. The older people
Mm,
did, but too many people only know Lafayette through the Hamilton show.
hmm.
And it's kind of disheartening as a historian that it's not being taught the same way that it used to be taught for whatever reason. Maybe there's a lot more history, a lot more stuff they have to kind of like compact into a school year. But this is an opportunity for us to kind of pretend like we're teachers and relearn ourselves what happened during the Revolutionary War, but then actually share that excitement that we had when we were kids. I mean, how many of us dressed up as George Washington or Thomas Jefferson or even Paul Revere riding on a pretend horse, say, hey, the British are coming, the British are coming. And we all know more about how that story was involved. When we were kids, we probably didn't know Paul Revere was a Mason.
Mm.
How much did we know about Masons and the Revolutionary War at that time when we learned? And this is an opportunity from a Masonic standpoint to kind of share that experience too, because when you really look how America was created, the country, that philosophy, which derives directly from the Enlightenment, which was occurring right around the same time, was shared with Freemasonry. And so, in a sense, Freemasonry was a crucible from which America was hatched.
I want to talk about two things you just brought up. So one is the idea of America 250, and we all think of, oh, Declaration of Independence, Revolutionary War, that's the birthplace of the country. But as you and I kind of talked about before we hit the record button here on the podcast, is that America 250 is from that point all the way up until like 6 months ago. And if you're listening to this podcast when it's released, we're recording this in mid-July of 2025. So yeah, America 250, we still have some time to get to that special moment when it becomes real. Let's talk about how all of those other parts of American history can relate to everyday Americans looking to just be proud and celebrate. You don't have to put the powdered wig on.
And I talk about this to people, with people all the time, how we take certain things for granted. For
Mm,
example, words like individual liberty, words and phrases like individual liberty, freedom, personal property, all these things we say, oh, of course. Who would argue with that? 250 years ago, that was radical thought. People didn't control the government controlled the people. Mostly monarchies controlled the people. So for you to believe that you could be on the level with those in charge of government, that was heresy. You were
mm,
hung if you thought that, especially in Europe. I mean, America was a little bit more lenient because we needed everybody who was here. The colonists, there weren't a lot of people here. We were really forging a new kind of economy within the colonies, and so we had to treat everybody the same. I mean, it was just a practical sort of matter. So it was a natural evolution for the colonies to kind of move away from this idea of monarchy and towards this idea of individual liberty and freedom.
mm. And one of the things I think is unfortunate is we had kind of talked about this as well, is that politics always kind of creeps into celebrations or just any part of our social happiness or joy that we find here in the United States. We live in a divisive country. It's been like this forever. Some people think it's just recent, but as a fan of history, I know going
Yeah, it's been
back.
like this for about 249 years.
Yeah.
You remember, I mean, you might not know, but during the Revolutionary War, if they were to take polls at that point, you would have found a third of the people were pro patriot, a
Mm.
third of the people were Tories, loyalists to England, and a third of the people were, I don't care, I just want to live my life. And does that sound like today? I mean, it does,
Hmm.
doesn't it? So
Yep.
in a way, this quote unquote divisiveness that we have is is a reflection on the American Revolution itself. The thing, here's an interesting point though, and again, it reflects on what Masonry is all about. During the Revolutionary War, there are several cited cases where one side maybe defeated the other side, and it didn't matter which side. And the defeated side, when you saw another brother Mason on the other side, you were more lenient. And in a couple of cases, you actually saved their lives, even though they were the quote unquote enemy. They weren't the enemy. The fact that they were a Masonic brother was higher than the fact that they were on different sides of the Revolutionary War. That's an important concept to keep in mind. And that's something that really we should share with everybody. It's the utmost definition of civility. I know war can never be called civil, but here's
Mm.
an example of brotherhood really overcoming this sort of political rift that occurred.
I've always said this on the podcast, and you'll appreciate it as a historian, Chris, is that I feel if you don't have a little bit of a history nerd bug in you, you're really not going to fully appreciate Freemasonry because there's so much, as you keep alluding to, this American history that's a part of it, from the signers of the Declaration of Independence, from the founding fathers, all the way up until presidents and great men and communities all across upstate New York or all across the great state of New York and our country. That just everyday people, everyday guys who were just good men who were Freemasons. And what's unique about this celebration is that we're getting to celebrate all of those unique moments beyond just the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And I like the fact that each of our regions across New York State, especially with our Grand Lodge, are planning events and getting ready to celebrate milestones. And there's tons of opportunities for lodges of all ages to get involved. When I say ages, some of our oldest lodges to some of our most recent lodges. Can you highlight some of the special things that you know that's going on in the Rochester and Buffalo area that you're getting excited about for this coming year?
Sure. Well, I can tell you just across the state, there's about a handful of events that the Grand Lodge will be involved with specifically, including one that I think is occurring after this show airs, or I'm sorry, before this show airs in July of 2025 in Saratoga. So we're working with the Massachusetts Lodge, Grand Lodge, together because that was really an event that involved both Massachusetts and New York. So that's one that's already occurred. Uh, I'll tell you, the big highlight's going to be in November of 2026, and that's
Mm,
going to be a ball at Grand Lodge. You should look forward to seeing more on that. It's already got scheduled. The room is already booked. We're working on exactly what that event is going to entail in terms of a cuisine, in terms of maybe speakers, or even a walking tour. If it's, we're in New York City, and there are elements within just the city itself that are pretty reflective of both Masonry and the Revolutionary War. Outside of the city region or the capital district, we've got definitely a couple of events occurring. One is to honor the Battle of Oriskany outside of Syracuse. The other is to honor really Joseph Brant, who's part of the Thomas Boyd story. Thomas Boyd, for those who don't know, was a member of the Sullivan campaign who was viciously killed. I mean, the detail of his death is accounted both from the Patriot side as well as the Seneca side, Seneca Indians, and it's horrific.
mm,
But it's also the story that I'm going to tell in a forthcoming book that I'm writing. He was a 23-year-old guy who probably did some stuff that he shouldn't have done in terms of his scout. Not that he did anything bad or say immoral. He just didn't do things correct by the book. He was a scout. He was only supposed to bring 4 guys out with him. He brought 20. He made a lot of noise. So that's what I mean about not doing the right thing. And then finally, he got caught. Not everybody
mm.
got caught. There were some people who got away, but he got caught and he was tortured and killed. And it occurred about, say, maybe 60 miles or 50 miles south of Rochester, in an area that we now called Canisius. Um, and he was buried there where they found him. Him and another guy by the name of Parker were both killed, but Thomas Boyd was the one who was really tortured, and they were later reinterred in Rochester. And I believe that General Sherman was involved somewhere with that, which is interesting. General Sherman, if you remember, this is Civil War history now, essentially did the same thing that Sullivan did during the Revolutionary War, which is basically it's a scorched earth kind of tactic where you prevent the enemy from continuing the war. And whether or not or how successful they each were, I mean, that's the subject of that historians debate. But the key thing is this with the Thomas Boyd thing. And this is where I was reflecting before about how enemies sometimes helped each other. Joseph Brant, he was a chief of the Mohawk tribe, and they were allies with the British. He was a Mason. And Thomas Boyd gave the Masonic signal of distress, and Joseph Brant recognized it. And he said, okay, we got to be nice to this guy. So he, in effect, at least for a moment, saved Thomas Boyd. But
Mm.
Joseph Brant left, and the Tory Ranger who was also there took over, and he did not recognize what Joseph Brant said. He did not honor that promise, and that's why Thomas Boyd was killed. So we're going to tell that story maybe a little bit more in depth and reflect on how that really showed the power of Masonry, even though in this case it didn't. There were other specific examples, by the way, in other places in New York where it is documented that Joseph Brant saved the lives of Patriot soldiers who were captured or kidnapped. But this is an important thing. Buffalo is also going to do something. Not quite sure yet. I don't think it's a Grand Lodge thing, but I'll be helping them out just because I helped them out before when it was with Lafayette, and I'm interested to see what ideas they have. One of the things to recognize is we don't have, when I say we, I mean Western New York doesn't have a lot of Revolutionary War history
Mm,
other than the Sullivan campaign, which really just affected the lower portion of the Western New York region. There's not a lot of activity that occurred. The Iroquois fled to Niagara Falls. The British held Niagara Falls. There were no really American Revolutionary War battles at Niagara Falls or in that area. We had to wait to the War of 1812 till we got that. But you know, the sense of the spirit of the revolution really did travel eventually to Western New York. Remember, at the time, after the Revolutionary War, Western New York was still a frontier.
yeah.
There was no settlement whatsoever until after the Revolutionary War. So people had to do things, people had to come here. And it was that Sullivan campaign that really opened up the eyes for the Continental Army, that the soldiers in the army, that hey, this is really prime territory to build farms, to build communities, to build families, and that's what came. And a lot of it, you know, you think of the Revolutionary War or you think of the American Revolution, that era, you think of the town hall meeting, primarily in New England. You don't think of it that much, say in say New York City or Albany, the parts of the colony that were really settled.
Mm,
But once you got the settlement out into the frontier, that whole town hall spirit kind of was reborn. Maybe not as quite New Englandish as it was in New England, but remember, a lot of these people who immigrated to Western New York came from New England, so they had
mm.
that spirit. And in fact, there's another thing that happens after the Revolutionary War that kind of propelled us to creating the Constitution. It was Shays' Rebellion. It occurred in Western Massachusetts. It was sort of like the leftover philosophy of the British governors. We're still there in Massachusetts, even after America became America and Massachusetts became a state. So you had this little rebellion. The guy, Daniel Shays, he's not buried in Massachusetts. He's buried right down the street here in
Hmm.
Western New York. So that's the sense that the revolution, the spirit of the revolution came to Western New York. And maybe that's something that we need to celebrate too.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you bring that up because as you're telling the story about the Revolutionary War, and yes, that's the beginning of the 250, and we're going through all of the years and all the history that goes with that. And what I get excited about hearing is, and again, this is a kid, history was always my favorite subject in high school. I loved hearing the stories because they were true from the past. But I can't wait to hear about the what made New York the Empire State when the Erie Canal came into play and how that completely transformed a region, as you said, that was considered the wilderness, which anyone who's gone out to Buffalo, I mean, yeah, there's still some woods out there, but it's pretty well developed out in western and central New York and all the way across the state. And then each one of these towns is going to have a story to tell. And here's the cool part as you keep pulling us back into it is that Freemasonry, we were the needle and thread that was stitching all of these communities and these stories and these moments together. And here's our chance to open up our lodge room doors and invite people in from the public and celebrate these moments and share these stories. And that's the thing that I would charge to brothers and like yourself. I was sitting here thinking, this has got to be First America 250. This is the second time you get to be excited to celebrate our country and how great it is. But you're also going to be master of your lodge next year. I'm imagining like it couldn't have come at a better time.
I don't know. I'll tell you next year when it happens.
But to my point is that you don't have to be completely connected. And I think that's one of the things that I hear brothers when they talk about America 250, they have this stereotype of, oh, well, you know what? It's just for those older lodges that have been around forever. And they always get to be the special lodges because they're the colonial era lodges. And true, they do have a really special legacy and a really unique story. But every lodge, it was a part of the history of the fabric of America. And we all have a story to tell. So don't just use your lodge meetings as the opportunity to tell these stories. try to come up with ways to invite the public into your room, bring families in, give kids the chance to maybe write essays or draw pictures or tell the stories through all of the generations that are there, and really return Freemasonry back to what it was, and so many checkpoints across, our history timeline here of just being an extension of the community that we're in.
Remember 250 years ago when these communities were first starting, there was no Chamber of Commerce. There
Mm,
was no Rotary Club. There were no these sort of civic organizations that really blossomed in the area, all areas. Now there was really only Freemasonry. Freemasonry was the only kind of social club. Maybe there were a couple of other things but Freemasonry was the main one, and everybody in the community was part of it. Freemasonry. I just look at my own lodge, which doesn't go back 250 years, goes back a little bit more than 150 years, but again, at the time the community was much smaller, but the lodge itself was the social hub of the community. There were balls, there were parties, there were carnivals held right inside I mean, it's a big lodge, so it has a big room, and you can get away with that. But this is the sort of thing that happened right from the start of America. And it doesn't matter if your lodge isn't 250 years old, like my lodge isn't 250 years old, but the legacy of Masonry comes with it. So you can go back and just go to the roots of Masonry. And I'll tell you, there's a story out of Jamestown or Fredonia, I think it is. Fredonia, yeah. The first master of the lodge there, I think it was about 1816. So again, it wasn't going back to the Revolutionary War, but he was a Revolutionary War hero. And I believe that his sons actually eventually became mayors of Rochester and Buffalo later on. But you can see in these early lodges in the early 1800s, a lot of which you'll see throughout Western New York or throughout all of New York, they were started by these Revolutionary War veterans. How were they familiar with Masonry? Well, the whole idea of the military lodge, which wasn't invented by George Washington or America, but it was refined by Washington for the Revolutionary War to bring everyone together to kind of show them in real time, in real life, what it meant to be on the level. Remember, all these different war guys came and from different colonies, different sort of customs, different sort of philosophies. You can't run an army with everybody having these different ideas on how to do things. You had to
mm,
bring them together. And this is what Washington did. He brought them together through these military lodges. There were traveling lodges, so it's not something that, you can say, you can point to, oh, it's been in existence for 250 plus years. But it was an important element. When the war was over and these veteran soldiers settled down in a location, they wanted to recapture that spirit of community that they found within the Masonic Lodge.
mm. Yeah, and that's been the story of Freemasonry from generation to generation, as you say. From the very beginning, we saw a huge spike after World War II. After every conflict, you have men that come back home that want to continue that brotherhood, and they find us. Real quick, Brother Chris, I want to talk a little bit about America 250 and where you can learn more on the Craftsman Online website. So if you go to craftsmanonline.com, we have our America 250 page up. It features a ton of the Grand Lodge of New York's upcoming milestones and opportunities. So a nice little calendar for you to check out to see what's going on. The other neat thing is our Grand Lodge has put together a festive board script. So we all love getting together for these big events, these table lodges afterwards. And if you're planning on doing one for your lodge next year in 2026, hey, you can enhance this a little bit more by going outside of our traditional table lodge script and use one that is specifically written to highlight America 250 and gives you the opportunity to plug in a quick little speech or story about a piece of history that happened in your town, in your area. Again, doesn't have to go back to the American Revolution. It could be from the 1900s or even this past. You could talk about 2000s if you wanted to get into that. The other key thing is if you have an event to share, your lodge is doing something special, your district is doing something special, or your community is doing something unique, and your lodge is all a part of it, let us know all at craftsmanonline.com by using that America 250 page. Lastly, if you have a brother or brothers in your lodge that are just still kind of scratching their head as to like what is the big deal about this celebration, we have a neat video that you can watch that kind of tells the story of America 250 so that we can all be ready to go up, open up our doors and start sharing the story of America and Freemasonry together for 250 years. The one thing I want to talk about with you, Chris, is that for too often we've heard some real misconceptions about Freemasonry. We've all heard the stories of, the stuff you see now on YouTube, these conspiracy theories that are out there. How can getting connected and working with the America 250 initiatives, how can those moments kind of help us overcome, Sarah, some of these still looming negative misconceptions or stereotypes about our craft?
Well, I think really right from the very beginning, you will see that there were Masons on both sides of this conflict. And like I mentioned before, they shared common ethics in terms of how they treated one another. So Masonry, in essence, transcended this military event that we call the Revolutionary War. It wasn't really part of it. I mean, obviously, it was because or a lot of people were Masons, but people didn't meet within lodges to conspire and create the revolution. There's a lot of stories about the Green Dragon Lodge and the Tea Party. Yeah, people when they are friends and they hang out in the same place, you might as well say it was the church that they all went to that
Mm.
that caused this controversy. No, it wasn't. It's just people. And I think really the big thing is you'll learn really if you do your research correctly and you learn the difference between the British form of Freemasonry, which we evolved from, and the continental Europe form of Freemasonry, you'll see maybe why these ideas of conspiracy came about. What was going on in Europe was very different than what was going on in Great Britain and the American colonies. And it's, as a historian, I'm just thinking all these things in my mind, very fascinating. But I don't want I don't want to get into it because we don't have a whole lot of time to kind of explain all this. For the regular person, it's just go and look and see what really happened. Participate in some of the activities. It doesn't have to be even within your lodge, just whatever is going on with the community. In fact, I'll tell you, this coming October, we are having this is the a publicly appointed Masons of New York State. It's a group within New York State of publicly appointed historians. How do you like that? They have an annual conference this year. It's going to be in Cazenovia, right in the heart of New York State. And I'll be leading a panel with Masons, Daughters of the American Revolution, Sons of the American Revolution, talking about how communities can bring these organizations together to celebrate America 250. So that's another
Mm.
thing you could think about. You could think about, all right, our lodge might want to be do it, but maybe we don't have any historical experts in it. We don't need any. You just need to know somebody who knows the local publicly appointed historian. Every
Right.
town, village, city should have one. County should have one. So you can go to them as a resource. You can go to the Daughters of the American Revolution. They're very good at putting on events and they're very interested in doing this. I know. I just went through the whole thing with Lafayette working with them. They actually took the lead in that one. In some aspects, maybe it's the Masons' turn to take the lead in some of these 250th events, but no doubt, I bet you the DAR has a lot of events planned already.
Mm. I like that you bring up that point because of all the lodges I visited from all across the country, each one has a special story that makes it really neat as part of the fabric of America's history. And if they don't, the community that they live in does. So I like that you point that out where like, hey, our lodge has been here for a while, but nothing really special has happened in that amount of time. Well, guess what? I'm sure your community has a story and the people that you live there, you can help be a part of sharing that. That's an awesome point that you made there, Chris. Before I let you go, I just wanted to ask you, was there anything that we didn't get a chance to talk about or that you wanted to mention about America 250 before we say farewell for this episode?
I really just want to emphasize that here's an opportunity for you to be a kid again.
Mm,
Everything that you enjoyed about playing history, not learning history, about playing history when you were a kid, you can do that all over again. The 250th anniversary takes away any excuse you have from admitting that you liked history. I know a lot of people sometimes are, oh, I don't want to say I liked history. That's just for boring people. Nah, this is the 250th. You get to play American Revolution and do whatever you want to do. Like I say, whatever you like. Doesn't have to be dressing up like soldiers and reenacting. It could be, uh, playing those little picnic games that they used to play in the 1800s, putting
Mm.
together a community event like that, just having fun. Let's have fun. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. And this is the first of several episodes that we'll have over the next year or so about the America 250 celebration. And I want to thank you, Chris, for coming on, because I'm sure your words are inspiring other brothers and other lodges to get to be a part of it. And one more time, if you're looking for a resource on more about the America 250 initiative, what's going on, how you can be a part of it, or just share the word on an event that you have happening, visit us at craftsmanonline.com. Brother Chris Carosa, just the senior warden of Union Star Lodge number 320. Thank you so much for coming on this episode.
Thank you for having me.